I can hear you okay, but I'll make sure that
Yeah.
you can.
So I've got this on, right?
Yes.
Awesome. And where's the, just so I have an idea, where's the current frame where I'm at?
Edge of the oak, halfway through the oak tree.
Here
Yeah.
to,
And then I can see all the way to right. Oh, just a little bit more to the. There you go. Right there. There's a very edge.
okay, so,
But I can follow you around.
yeah, right. I'm just talking as I'm talking or just doing this. Because if I have you follow me around, I want it to be because I'm showing something particular, not just because I've wandered off screen vaguely.
Hey, everybody, can you let us know? Ask them to let us know if they can hear you. All right?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. As you log in, if you can let us know if you can hear us okay, that would be awesome. We'll be getting started with the program here in a few minutes.
There's always a delay while they type stuff.
Yep.
Got about 16 people already. That's good.
Awesome. Yeah, this is a good
spot.
Awesome.
The tiniest, I can't show it because he's actually on the cable that goes in with the sound.
Right.
But there's the tiniest little spider standing on my iPad right now.
Awesome.
He's right here.
Yeah.
I thought he was an ant.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a good spot to see a lot of stuff in a very limited area here to talk about. So, managed to find a bunch of specimens and stuff right here to talk about.
Okay, so we have about 40 people if you want to go ahead and...
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Phoenix of Phoenix's Curiosity Cabinet, and I'm here today with Open Space to present about oaks and their habitat. So we can learn a little bit about this unique California habitat and all the really cool things you can find just even around one tree. So there are several species of oak in California. The one we're by today is a valley oak. And you'll see them in areas like this where there's a lot of open space and then the trees kind of spread out. But these form a really important part of our local ecosystem. There's a lot of plant and animal communities that depend on these trees. So just starting with the tree itself, like all plants, it's going to be helping to provide us oxygen. And it's also a major source of food for both animals and people in the kind of the base of one of our food webs here. There's everything from the animals that might feed on leaves to the acorns are a major food source for a lot of wildlife. And even as the oak starts to die and decompose, it's going to be food for a whole host of different insects and scavengers and fungi as those nutrients get returned back to the soil to start the whole process all over again. So does anyone have any particular questions they're hoping to get answered about oaks? You can type them and Terry will read them off to me as they come in. So there are several branches down here this morning. Is it possible to get close, zoom in on the leaves themselves?
Susan says, stay safe, thinking of you all.
Yeah. So this probably blew down in one of the recent storms we had, if I had to guess, because these leaves are still pretty fresh. They're not dried out, so it can't have been down on the ground all that long. But valley oaks do have these wavy edge leaves, and this is what we stereotypically think of as an oak leaf. But if you get a chance to see different oak species, there will be some variation. For example, black oaks leaves will be larger, and instead of being rounded on the edges, they're going to come to a point. Live oak trees don't look like this at all. They're kind of teardrop shaped with spiny edges. And one of the differences between these valley oaks and the live oaks, The valley oaks are deciduous. They're going to lose their leaves here as we get into the fall, and through the winter these trees will be bare. So they'll go dormant like other deciduous trees, but the live oaks actually keep their leaves throughout the year. They'll lose them and replace them, but it's gradual, a little bit at a time. So they appear to be green the whole year round. But they'll still have that same place in the ecosystem providing food and habitat that these guys do. So I found evidence of a whole bunch of the animals that we have around here walking around this morning. So I found a number of acorn shells that have been remains of food remains, because lots of times when we're out in nature, we might not see the animals themselves. They go, humans, and take off, but we can almost always find signs they've been there. So in this case, the squirrels have been busy. And if we're lucky, we might get to see some of the squirrels run through the background here. I see them out on the hillsides. But they've been getting these and gathering up the acorns and leaving the remains. And there's probably some other animals and rodents that have been doing the same. So there's a lot of acorn shells around the ground here right now. I haven't actually been able to find a full acorn today. The squirrels have done a pretty good job of clearing them out, I think, at this particular tree. But, oops, there goes the microphone. So the acorns, they'll have different amounts different years. Some years there's, just like any other thing, some years there's bumper crops and tons of extra acorns. Sometimes there's not going to be nearly as many. It's going to depend on the particular tree cycle, what's the weather has been like, have they gotten enough water that year, have they has the temperature cooperated. So we're actually seeing a lot of changes in plant life right now overall throughout the environment because of the changes going on with temperature and climate and weather patterns. So there's a lot of scientists that are tracking that to try and figure out where those patterns and shifts are happening. Because when the plant life changes, that changes the whole system of interdependence of everything in the area. So some other signs of animal life we found here around here this morning is have what looks like the remains of a bird nest. So just the bottom of it, but we can see where the fibers are still together here. And I will leave this here under the tree to continue decomposing and going back to nature. But a lot of bird species are going to depend on these trees. One of the most common that I like to point out is the acorn woodpecker, because they will gather up the acorns and they actually store them. So instead of just eating them on the spot, they maintain granaries. They'll find an old dead tree, or sometimes a telephone pole, or a lamppost, or anything they think is a dead tree, and they will drill holes and stuff the acorn into that hole and store them. And as family groups, they will defend the granaries. So if you get near one, they'll start go rotten, 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 and trying to scare anything away that might want their acorns. And during the course of the year, they'll eat the acorns both for the acorns themselves and the protein of any grubs that may have gotten into the acorns while they've been stored. They'll eat both. So if we're lucky, at some point during the day, we might hear some of the acorn woodpeckers making their call in the background. I've heard a few of them here this morning. Stellar jays are going to be, and scrub jays are going to be other bird life that really likes the acorns. In fact, one of the big ways new oak trees get planted are squirrels and scrub jays will bury the acorns out there with the idea of going back to them and either not get back to them or forget they were there. And then those acorns have a chance to sprout to start the next generation of oak trees.
So we do have a question from Elizabeth.
Okay.
She'd like to know why some oak trees are deciduous and others are not. And is the live oak a native tree, or is there some reason that it's not deciduous?
The live oak is a native tree in the area. My guess is it would be about water usage and saving. So a lot of the trees like this will lose their leaves in the winter because we have less hours of sunlight, and the amount of energy that their leaves are able to produce does not equal the energy needs of actually going through that process because they don't get enough sunlight to make that energy balance. So they'll lose their leaves. Live oaks tend to have smaller leaves, and they tend to be a little waxier and harder than this, so I don't think they lose as much water. And they will lose leaves a little at a time, but just not all at once. So I do not know for sure, but my guess would be the energy needs that they have are balanced differently than the valley oaks.
The other question that we have is regarding fire, and they want to know if oaks are fire resistant at all.
Not the same way redwood trees are. Redwood trees tend to be very fire resistant, and actually redwood seeds will even need fire to properly germinate. Oak trees are not fire resistant in the same way. So they will catch on fire and burn, and they don't need they're not adapted to need the fire the same way.
And then Robin's asking how many different oaks grow in California. Like, what do you think about that?
I'm not entirely sure the number. I know it's a lot of different species. Do you know the particular number?
Not myself. I wanted to say that there's like 8 or 9 that I'm aware of, but there's probably more in California for sure.
Yeah. And you'll find different ones in different habitats as well. We got the valley oaks here. I've only seen the black oaks where it's a lot more shady. Live oaks can be where it's very dry and scrubby. So, some other examples of some of the life around here is we actually found a barn owl feather. So, the owls obviously aren't going to be eating the acorns, but they will like to eat the things that eat the acorns. So any of the small rodents that might be showing up here to gather up nuts and things, if they're out at night, they become dinner for this owl. And if there's any places where there's holes and large cavities in the trees and stuff, you could even get an animal like a barn owl nesting. But owls actually fly very silently. They're adapted to be able to sneak up on their prey and be able to catch it without knowing it's coming. And you can't see it so much on this feather, but sometimes the edges are kind of feathered and soft to kind of dampen the noise of the owls flying. This is one of the flight feathers off of a wing. You can tell because this side is narrow and this side is long, and that's for the aerodynamics of this is true of any bird flight feathers, that provides the lift as they move along. Matter of fact, if you ever pick up like one of those big turkey feathers from the craft store, if you go like this, you can actually feel the air push up underneath it that would create the lift for that bird. But owls have 3D hearing. They've got one ear low on their head and one ear up high. So with our ears on opposite sides of our head, we're pretty good at telling is the sound coming from the right or the left. But in addition to that, owls can tell is it up high or down low. So they can get a 3D map based on sound the way we would depend on our sight. As a matter of fact, they've found that barn owls' hearing is so acute, scientists have done studies where they put a mouse loose in a carpeted room that's entirely dark, and the barn owl could still catch it. So they've got incredible hearing, and the facial disc we see on the owls actually help direct the sound back towards their ears as well. So this was a very fortunate find this morning to get to talk about owls a little bit. They're one of my favorite creatures to talk about, so we'll leave this feather here. So as you guys go around hiking and stuff, I always recommend to people that if you want to keep a memory of what you saw, take a picture, make a drawing, but leave stuff there for other people to come and enjoy. And as well as most of the preserves, things are protected and need to be left there. So this one I did not find here. This is from my teaching collection. This is a deer skull. It is not the same species as the deer we have here, but the skulls are going to look pretty similar. Deer depend on the acorns a lot. That will be a major forage item for them in the fall. They'll eat grasses and leaves other types of the year. But being able to gather those acorns will give them some extra protein, some extra energy as winter's coming up. We can tell deer are adapted for plant life because if we look at their teeth, there's good flat grinding teeth here for crushing up plant material. One of the other signs that sometimes we see animals leave behind that we can tell what's been there is scat, or that's what scientists like to call poop. So animal scat will tell us what animals have been through there, what they've been eating, because we might find bone remains or fur or seeds. Deer scat will actually change at the time of year of how it appears. In the spring and most of the year, it looks like little oval pellets. When they're eating a lot of acorns, though, it will be bigger and lumpier. So that's an indication that those deer's diet is changing at that time of the year. And just some stuff about skulls, since I have it here at the back. You can see the hole where the spinal cord and spine would attach, so the spinal cord could go up to the brain. We can see the hole in the eye orbital where the optic nerve would, connect in. Now this particular specimen, the nose broke off of. The nose should be out to about here. But you can see that there's all these fine bones there. Can you see that on the video okay?
Oh, yeah.
So animals that have long noses like this with a lot of those fine bones, this is an indication that they've got a good sense of smell. So they are depending on their smell in some way, whether it's to detect danger or if it's a predator to hunt prey. The deer eyes are facing out sideways more. This is a adaptation for their vision. Most prey animals, their eyes will be on the side because that gives them a very wide range of view, because they want to be able to watch for predators that might be trying to sneak up from behind. Predators will usually have their eyes faced more towards the front to give them stereographic or 3D vision. Because if you're running and chasing something down, being able to judge distance and spacing is going to be a lot more important if your food's going to run away. Acorns don't run very fast. Deer don't need that deep of stereo vision. But they do need to be able to detect predators.
And question about turkeys. What about turkeys? Do they like acorns?
Oh yes, I'm sure they would gobble them up as they find them. And I'm pretty sure there's probably flocks of turkeys around here somewhere because they are a fairly common thing.
Flip that to the bottom of your shirt.
Ah, there we go. Yeah. So some samples of some other life growing on the oak itself is we have got, on these down pieces of wood, several different types of lichen. So we've got this kind of lighter green one, this more lime one, the rusty orange one. And these, we can see them growing up on the live trees different places as well. The lichen do not hurt the tree. They'll just grow on the outside of it. We also have some moss growing up on further up the tree here. But lichens are actually a result of two organisms in a symbiotic relationship. At some point in their evolutionary history, there was a fungus and an algae that decided that working together was going to be beneficial. You don't really find them too much, these particular species, divided up anymore by themselves. But the algae goes through photosynthesis, can provide food. The fungus is providing a structure for it to live on, as well as possibly getting some nutrients from whatever it's living on. But lichen are actually an indicator of air quality. So if you have, trees that have lots of lichens on them, this is actually a good sign for the health of the air quality in that area. Okay, do we have any more questions coming in right now, or?
Not at the moment.
Okay, so I'm going to actually have you follow me this way a little bit so we can check out a few things I saw over this way. So, can you zoom up on the oak galls up there at all?
There we go.
Yeah, and I've got some down closer as well for us to see, but I wanted to see it on the tree itself. But these are something you fairly commonly find growing on valley oak trees, or eventually they fall down on the ground. These are called oak galls. Sometimes people call them oak apples, but they are evidence of some of the insect life that depends on these oak trees. So there is a wasp that, and it's a tiny type of wasp, that will lay its eggs on the tree, sting the tree, and inject it with a growth hormone that prompts the tree to grow these big wooden balls around the eggs. This serves a couple functions for the insect. It protects the eggs, and it also protects and provides food for the larvae when they emerge. Eventually, when it's time for them to go through metamorphosis and come out as adult wasp, can you see that hole there that's above my finger? They will tunnel their way out to continue their life cycle. So when you find the holes in them, you know that the wasp has already emerged. When these first start forming in the spring, they're green. So they'll start small, they get big and green, and then they'll dry out, eventually become these brown ones. Eventually they just fall off the tree and you can find them on the ground. So this provides protection, not complete protection. Squirrels will like to grab these and pull them apart to get to the larva. So sometimes you will find chewed up ones on the ground that have been ripped open for animals going after the larva inside.
Just a reminder for folks coming in late, yes, this, or around now, yes, this is Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve. I forgot the north one's a different one.
Right. So if we can actually bring the camera around over on this part. So we've been talking a lot about the function of the trees when it's alive, but as parts of the tree die off, it is still a vital part of the whole system. So this particular branch is dying off. And you can see that there is a lot of insect damage on here. There are lots of little holes. There's some large tunnels that have been eaten out. So as the wood starts to decompose, there's a number of bark beetle larvae that will eat it, a lot of insects that will burrow into it. So that's providing both food and homes for those insect life. And that's going to provide food for some of those birds we talked about too, because they're going to want to try and drill in and grab these if they can. In fact, that, if you see woodpeckers drilling into trees, that's what they're looking for in trees, are the insects that might be burrowed down inside of here.
So bugs hurt the tree?
There are some insects that can harm the tree. Most of the ones we're looking at, the images here, are ones that move in after the tree's already dead or dying in that branch. So they're decomposing. So over time, now most of this tree is very healthy. If we scan around, we can see that we're under a pretty big canopy of leaves. This is a good sized oak tree. But even on a healthy tree, you will get branches that become damaged, and those particular branches will die off. So we can see on the ground a variety of branch pieces that have fallen down over time during the life of this oak and are now decomposing and creating habitat on the ground. Now, if you're out there walking around in nature and you see things like logs and go, wow, or rocks and go, I wonder if there's any life under that. If you look, make sure you put them back. This is the roof of somebody's home. And if you roll a log, the sunlight and the drying out can actually kill and disrupt the ecosystem that's developing under that log. And also for safety for both you and the animals, if you are lifting rocks, can you come down to show me here? Because there could be creatures living under these, roll it gently towards you like this. This is just a small one. But that means if there's anything hiding underneath it, any snakes or creatures that you don't really want to come towards you, they will move away from you because you've got the log between you and them. So it's a safer way to check underneath. You never want to stick your fingers and hands under things you can't see because you don't know what could be underneath things until you look. And then after you look, make sure you gently roll it back to put the roof back on any of the insects, in wetter areas, salamanders, any of the fungal colonies under there, that gets put back the way it is. You know, whenever we come out to these wonderful preserves, we want to leave it the way we found it or better than we found it. You know, if we find trash along the way, pick it up and pack it out with us.
But I have a question about, is it possible to find out how old an oak tree is or a tree is without killing it?
Scientists can take an estimate, sometimes based on size. They can also drill plugs. If they really want to know how old the tree is, they can do a core sample to pull out to count the rings from there. So there are ways of telling if they need to know, but usually, unless we need to know a precise age for some reason, or they're doing a study on how old are the trees in this area, they'll just estimate based on the size and where it is in its life cycle. You know, our branch is starting to die off and get weak and fall off. How big's the diameter of the trunk? And things includes like that. So, any other questions coming in so far?
Oh, somebody was asking about mistletoe.
Yes, mistletoe is another thing that is going to be important on oaks. And I don't see any obvious on this tree, although it could be up here. You will see the mistletoe more likely when these lose their leaves in the winter. You can look up, and if you look at a valley oak that's lost its leaves in the winter, and there's a big round cluster of green stuff, that's the mistletoe. And mistletoe is a parasitic plant that will grow on other things. That means it's taking food and nutrients from what it's growing on. But most of the oaks can withstand it. Most healthy plants, unless they're sick, are going to withstand it pretty well. It's not going to kill the tree on its own unless the tree is already sick and dying. But the mistletoe is where it's poisonous to humans. A lot of wildlife can eat the berries, and that's another important food source in this whole oak habitat ecosystem.
So we had someone ask if you could repeat the questions because they can't hear me.
Oh, okay. So
but yeah.
Yeah, so the question in this case was, somebody had asked about mistletoe growing on the plants.
And then Vince wants to know if sudden oak death is a significant problem in our area.
It is.
Also tell them the question.
So the question is sudden oak death a significant problem in our area? It is. It is spreading throughout this area. And many preserves and places will have, I've now seen signs saying, okay, if you've been hiking through this area, please clean off your boots, your shoes before you go hiking into another area so you don't transfer spores that might be from an infected area to a new area where it wasn't before.
They're cracking up because there's a squirrel behind you.
Yes, there is. So our squirrel is making an appearance here, trying to find any of those acorns that might still be around. So it is a vital part of our ecosystem. And it's going to provide food for a whole lot of other things. So bobcats, coyotes, birds of prey, they're all going to see that guy as a tasty lunch. And we can see that these squirrels really like this, because if we turn around here, we can actually see the squirrels have been building tunnels and holes around the base of the tree to live in. So we've got several openings to squirrel burrows here. And there we got a squirrel munching right out there by the picnic tables. So I think they're getting a little bit used to us standing here, and they're starting to come back in and say, yeah, we don't know what these people are doing, but they're not bothering us, so let's go get our food. But some of the burrows here, I'm actually seeing acorns littered around the edge of, at least the shells. So these squirrels have found themselves a very good habitat. So that's an important reminder that the oak trees are supporting a habitat that goes right up the food web. They're producing the plants, things eat them, and then things that eat the acorns get eaten by other animals. And this is going to go on, so even when those predators die, they will decompose, and their remains will nourish the plants in the oak, and those nutrients just keep moving around and supporting each other.
Switch places with you, so
Yes. Yes.
And how are you doing with your lungs? We're at about 30 minutes.
Yeah, I am doing fine. The air is where it's a little smoky here still. Is not as bad as I was worried it might be. So we've got some more time. We can keep going here for a while. I'm going to set down my oak galls though. So the acorns supported not just the local animals here, but historically they were a vital food source for the Ohlone people. So the Ohlone people are the native peoples from this area. The Ohlone people are still here. So what we're talking about right now is some of the historic traditional ways they process acorns. But the Ohlone people still have gatherings to remember their traditions and how acorns were processed. So, but the acorns were a vital food source historically. So acorns would be gathered in the fall. They'd be stored. Now, if you just munch on an acorn, it's going to be really bitter. It's got something called tannic acid. You're not going to want to eat much. But the Ohlone would process them to take that tannic acid out and make them palatable to eat. This involved grinding them up. And in fact, several areas around here, you can find historic grinding rocks. If you go to, for example, Santa Clara County Park's Chachoktok Park has some examples of Ohlone mortars and pestles in the bedrocks where the acorns were ground up. After the acorns were ground into a fine flour, they would leach the tannic acid out. This could be done by boiling. This could be done by running water in a stream over it or pouring water over it repeatedly. And this was done until the bitterness was gone. Then they could be cooked. The traditional method, the Ohlone had a tradition of basketry, and Ohlone people today are still preserving their basketry traditions. But they would make a basket to cook in. Well, since you can't just put a basket right on the fire, the method to cook in a basket was to take a stone that you heated in the fire and put the hot rocks right in the basket with the water and the acorns and use the residual heat from those rocks to cook it into an acorn mush that could be eaten. And there are old ways and new ways of doing things. That was a traditional way. People I've talked to today have talked about using coffee grinders and stuff to grind up nuts or boiling the acorns on the stove. So there are both old ways and new ways of doing things. Okay, do we have any more questions coming in right now, or?
You have to hesitate for a moment.
Yeah.
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment? Okay. So, Yeah, we're lucky to have found such a nice big oak to broadcast under today, because it's allowed us to find a lot of different things in a limited space for this ecosystem. And especially as the air quality better, I encourage all of you to get out to these open spaces and enjoy them and get to see them firsthand. It's so worth it to see them close up and in person. So, trying to think of other stuff. Yes.
So, I'm always curious about like traditional like folk tales and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard any like folk ideas about oak trees?
Well, I know a lot of cultures have stories about oak trees, because the oak trees aren't just a California tree. They're found in a lot of areas of the world. You can look up, if you're looking around some of the European areas, you can find all sorts of stories of oak trees and mythologies and ways it ties into different stories from different areas of the world.
Nancy says you're really interesting. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, awesome. I'm so glad you're enjoying it, Nancy. And we will be. I'll be joining Open Space once a month for programs like this. And I run my business, Phoenix's Curiosity Cabinet, where I do a variety of programs for both adults and kids, both short-term and long-term nature and maker programs. So if you're interested in finding out about more of what I do, check out Phoenix's Curiosity Cabinet on Facebook. So, I'm trying to think of any other things I'm seeing around immediately to talk about here. And just kind of checking out the tree around me. Yes, the squirrels are closing in. So.
Roger said, don't stand under a big oak tree for too long, exploding branch syndrome. What's that? That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, so I am guessing it's referring to the fact that some of these branches, as they get old, are known to fall down. So like this one we were talking that's starting to die off, eventually that will fall off the tree. So yeah, it is always good to be aware when you're walking under trees of how stable things are looking above you. Maybe don't try and hang off a branch that's dying and pull on that. And of course, since we had rare lightning storms here recently, a few weeks ago in the Bay Area, lightning will go for the tallest tree. So if you are walking in an area like this, ever in a lightning storm, don't stand under the tree. Be in an open area, as low to the ground as are. You do not want to be the highest thing around in a lightning storm. In fact, lightning ties in. You asked about mythology earlier. Oak trees are lightning and oak trees come together in a lot of different mythologies and folk tales around the world. Probably because they do tend to be a tall tree that's more likely to get struck. So I'm seeing a lot of insect life around us here, which is a little harder stuff. But if I recall correctly, insects are going to be one of our themes coming up next month. Yeah, so I'll be getting to present a little bit about our local insect and their relative life here, because part of what I love about coming out to preserves like this in person is getting to find the small details that are hard to see otherwise, getting down close to the ground, looking really deeply at those small details. Because as we look out in these fields, we could go out and pick anywhere here, pick like 1 square foot out there on that field and probably have enough stuff going on with the life and the ecosystem there to do a whole program on. The layers of this go infinitely with what you can explore once you're out here.
So a question is there a normal distribution method for acorns, or is it mostly squirrels?
A lot of it's going to be the wildlife and squirrels burying it. So that's going to be the primary way that they distribute. Seeds in general are always going to have some way they need to go away from the parent plant. Because if they all grow around the parent plant, eventually there's not going to be enough resources in the soil, enough room to grow. There's going to be too much competition. And the whole point of passing on stuff to the next generation is to keep it going, not to compete with it. So you have everything from seeds that are like dandelions that will be carried to new places on the wind. You have some things like a lot of berries are adapted to be eaten and pooped out somewhere else to transport. In fact, there's some seeds that won't sprout unless they've gone through an animal's digestive tract and that to dissolve the outer scar, the outer part of the seed coat. And if you're planting any of those seeds artificially, you'll need to like rub them on sandpaper or something to replicate that. Some seeds, like in colder areas, have to go through a cold cycle before they sprout. There have been seeds that I've tried to sprout on my porch where they say on the package, stick them in the refrigerator for a few weeks because you have to trick the seed into thinking they've been through winter before they'll sprout. Acorns, they want to, basically, here comes our squirrel right here even, making our guest appearance. So squirrels and jays and animals will carry the acorns around. The tree produces a lot more than will ever sprout. One of the reasons for the abundance is a lot of them actually will be eaten. And only a small number will actually get a chance to germinate and sprout compared to what the trees produce. But anytime you have something that's a nut or a large seed with food, you can pretty much assume that that is very likely adapted to be carried somewhere by an animal because there's more food in that than the seed will probably need to get going. And it's adapted to basically entice animals to come and get it by providing a big source of energy.
So Nancy's asking, do the crevices in our hills seem to be like the perfect place for trees? Is it because it's more moist? So like they're probably looking up here.
Yes, so the shape of the landscape will actually show a lot, influence a lot where the plants are. So when you have crevices, this is going to be an area where water can, when it is raining, is going to tend to go downhill and collect there more. Also, it's going to depend on where the hill is in relationship to the sun and the path of the sun. So the place I've seen this really, if we're going to Alum Rock Park, the two sides of the valleys have drastically different plant life. And it has to do with the side that's more wooded is in shade most of the time from the way the path of the sun comes over, as where the other side is in direct sun a lot of the time and dries out much more. So the shape of where the land is in relationship to the sun for what's going to dry out faster is going to be a factor, as well as where's the shape for the water to run and collect.
Why do squirrels like to burrow here? Ivy's asking, she's 7.
Yeah, Ivy, great question. The question was, why do squirrels like to burrow here? Squirrels build burrows because it's a safe, in general, because it's a safe place for them to get at night. If you're a squirrel, there's a lot of things that want to eat you for lunch or dinner. So if you're resting and you're not out foraging, you want a safe place away from predators. Having a burrow underground is going to do that. And so they're going to find soft soil, so the soil around here is soft enough they can dig in. But also, they've got their cafeteria right here. What a better place to build your home when you can just wander out and have breakfast right there. So they're going to want to build places near places that are going to have plentiful food for them.
So we're at about 10:45.
Okay. So, our squirrel's back again.
They've been sneaking around behind you.
Yep, they have. And squirrels are an example of a member of the rodent family. So they're going to have those big front gnawing teeth like mice and rats and other rodents. They actually most rodents need to gnaw on things because those front teeth do keep growing. And if they don't gnaw on things, they can get problems from those teeth getting too long. So the Oh, yeah. Yep, and he's having his breakfast right there with the his acorn. Yeah, I guess they've kind of gotten used to me here and decided I'm not a threat. But so that chewing on those acorns is actually good for their teeth as well, because they have to get through that hard shell, as well as any other nuts. The squirrels near where I live, there's a black walnut tree, and they're always tearing those things apart to get to the nuts, and those have even harder shells than the acorns. And if we're looking at the squirrel here too, we can see, like on my deer skull, their eyes are kind of to the side, so they've got a wide field of view to look for predators. We can see their ears. They've got a good sense of hearing to listen for danger. And those big fluffy tails are for balance. So if they're jumping and climbing around, they can use that tail to balance themselves. Now the squirrels we're looking at here are actually ground squirrels. So they are living in the ground. They're spending most of their time in the ground. The squirrels you're probably used to seeing around your house or in city parks are tree squirrels or gray squirrels. So those squirrels are going to be nesting in the trees. So if you've ever been walking around your neighborhood in the fall after trees have lost their leaves and you see this big ball of dried leaves, that's a squirrel nest. So tree squirrels will nest in the tree instead of in the ground like these ground squirrels. So they have different, even though they're both squirrels, they have different habitats. And if you were to compare the tails on a gray tree squirrel as opposed to these ground squirrels, the tree squirrels actually have bigger, fluffier tails because they're leaping from branch to branch and need that extra balance to judge the spaces.
We had a question about if you could determine the age of an oak tree by the diameter, like breast height, like the circumference.
Yeah, so the question is, can we determine the age of an oak tree by the circumference? We can take a good guess. It's not going to be exact because tree circumferences are going to vary based on how good the growing conditions were. If they've had plenty of water, plenty of space, all the things they need, they will grow bigger faster. If plants are crowded together, they grow slower because there's not as much room. Or if you have a few years of severe drought, they're not going to grow that faster in those years. So if you ever get a chance to look through a slice of a tree, you can see the rings that tell us the age. And you'll notice some rings are fat and some are skinny. That's telling you how much that tree grew that year. And you can make assumptions based on, oh, we've got a really fat ring on this tree. This tree must have had a really good year where it had plenty of water, plenty of space. If there were narrower rings, okay, what was going on? Was there drought? Was the temperature too hot? What changed? Was the tree, did they start growing a lot quicker because the tree that overshadowed them all of a sudden fell down and now they have a lot more sunlight so they can grow faster? So it will give us a rough idea of age, but not an exact idea of age.
Probably one last question is about the relationship between burrowing owls and squirrels.
Yes, I love burrowing owls. Owls in general are one of my favorite animals to talk about. But burrowing owls will live in burrows on the ground, and generally they like to take over. They'll find any play holes they can go into, but they're also known to take over squirrel burrows to live in. Probably after usually eating the occupants if possible. So the burrowing owls will eat the squirrels if they can catch them. But if they find a nice big burrow, they also go, aha, nice new home. Awesome. Okay, any last questions?
If you have a large oak tree on your property, how should you protect it or care for it?
Okay. So this would, for more details, I would talk to an arborist about your exact situation. But in general, some of the really old oaks, you want to be careful of compressing the soil around the roots. If the soil gets too compressed from foot traffic or wherever, that can damage a tree over. Also, like sometimes if you find big historic oaks in public parks, I know there's one in Sunnyvale that's a heritage oak that's 200 years old. They have it cordoned off so that people can't walk over where the tree roots are and compress the soil. Watch it for signs of disease that need to be taken care of by a professional arborist that can tell you if, okay, this branch is getting weak and should come down, or okay, we've got a fungal infection here, we have to take care of that so it doesn't affect the rest of the tree. So I would say just be observant and call in the professionals when you have questions.
Okay, so if you want to remind them again about your programs coming up and your ability for them to learn from you, and,
Yeah.
and then say, let them know that, thank you for coming.
Yeah. So once again, I'm Phoenix, Phoenix's Curiosity Cabinet. I teach hands-on science, nature, and maker programs for people of all ages. You can find out more about my programs on my Facebook page, Phoenix's Curiosity Cabinet, and you can message me through there as well. I will be coming back to work with Open Space once a month on a variety of subjects. So this theme was about oak habitats, and we'll be talking about insects and their relatives next time. So join us again, second Saturday of the month for next month for a whole new group of natural history facts about the world we live in. Thank you for joining us at the Open Space Preserve today at Coyote Valley here, and I hope to virtually see you all again. Have a great day.